Welcome to this is now the fourth session and the second iteration of the Community History Online conference that we've been running online in association with the Captain Center, the South African Jewish Museum. We're going to start in a few minutes. You'll note that this is not a webinar. This is set up as a meeting. This is to encourage a little bit more interaction between not only yourself and the presenters, but with everybody else on the call as well. The name of this conference is Community History Online, and as it implies, it's a collection of people who are interested in South African Jewish history and are working in various different forms or places and projects, putting their history and and recollections online, whether this be through social media, websites, archives, and anything else. I should have introduced myself to start. My name is Gavin Morris. I'm the director at South African Jewish Museum. I am glad that you're all with us. We'll have people joining as we go along, which is why I'm just starting us off a little bit later. I'll give you a bit of background into Community History Online. This is a project that was started late last year. We had 3 sessions previously. We have a number of presenters at each session. Each of the presenters, whether they be professional or amateur, have a deep interest in South African Jewish history and community, and making sure that the memories and recollections and stories of these communities are all made accessible online for future generations and to interact with each other. The Community History Online sort of executive committee is made up of the South African Jewish Museum, the Kaplan Center for Jewish Studies at UCT, and 2 very dedicated people to the South African Jewish History Online. The first being Geraldine Aberbach, who keeps the memory of Jewish Kimberley alive through regular newsletters, each telling a newly researched story about the community. And Geraldine really is the gold standard in keeping dying communities together in the online space. Kimberley has very few Jewish families left, but Jewish Kimberley expats are around the world, and Geraldine has built a phenomenal network of these people keeping everyone together. Geraldine will be moderating next week's session, which will take place on Wednesday evening. And the other person on our executive committee who's also played a big role in getting this all together is Eli Rabinovitz. Eli is based in Perth, Australia. He is a board member. Sorry, Eli, I'm just looking for your actual He's the board member of Kahila Links, and he runs 88 different Kahila Links pages. Sorry, Eli, for some reason, oh, here it is, the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. There we go. Also has a very deep interest in South African and Jewish history in general. As I said, he runs 88 Kahila Links pages, which are part of the jewishgen.org. And he serves on numerous different committees, all involved around Jewish genealogy and history. We have 3 presenters today. We have 3 presentations and 4 presenters today. In the first session, we have a presentation by Leila Bloch and Katie Garrun. Leila Bloch is the archivist and researcher here at the SA Jewish Museum, and Katie Garrun forms the same function at the Kaplan Center for Jewish Studies. And they will be speaking on or giving information on how to record your family history online, a really sort of beginner's guide. They'll speak specifically to the South African Jewish Museum Digital Archives, where we provide a space for Jewish families and communities and organizations to form a collection of their own memories, and we keep it safe in an online space. Then we'll hear from Kallmann. Garrun is the chairperson of the Union of Jewish Women in Cape Town. She's also writing the history of UJW, and she's going to give us some insight into her research and the difficulties and pitfalls she's come across. And this will all lead to a book that she is writing, which will be published towards the end of the year and will coincide with an exhibition, please God, about the UJW at the South African Jewish Museum at the end of the year. And our final speaker today is Gwen Robbins, our Gwynne Schrire. Gwynne is Deputy Director of the Board of Deputies in Cape Town. She's also a senior researcher. She's a regular contributor to Jewish Affairs. She's forgotten more about Jewish history in Cape Town than most people ever knew. And she'll be talking about the benefits of online versus offline exhibitions and recordings of history. So with that all said and done, I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping. Please make sure all your mics are on mute. What we will do is after each presentation, I will allow for 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll move on to the next one. And then we'll have a Q&A for all the presenters at the end of the third talk. And I think that is all I have to say in terms of housekeeping. Remember that this is being recorded. You'll be able to watch the recordings of all the sessions on the South African Jewish Museum YouTube channel. Those include the 3 previous sessions. So if you miss it or have to leave early, or if anybody asks about it, just go on to the SAJM YouTube channel or go onto YouTube and search South African Jewish Museum, and you will find all these talks over there. Thank you for joining us. And I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with Leila Bloch, who is going to start us off with today's program. Oh, and one last thing, if you do have questions or anything that you'd like to share, please use the chat function as we go along. I'll be keeping a track of that, and we'll ask your questions onto the presenters when the time comes. And okay, Leila, I'm going to share screen with you now.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Leila Bloch, and I'm an archivist and researcher at the South African Jewish Museum, and I'm here today with Katie Garrun, who's the archivist at the Kallmann Center, and she'll introduce herself shortly. Today we're going to share a very practical guide with you on how to share your family histories, photographs, and material with us. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the boxes of letters kept in storage, gathering dust in garages or cluttering drawers. Perhaps you're still holding on to family letters, home video material, we want to remind you of the importance of this in our project, and also give you a step-by-step guide on how you can prepare these collections using archival standards for our website. The digital archive's benefits extend beyond the mere preservation of materials. It has also become a locus and source from which historians, researchers, and indeed anyone interested can draw upon. Moreover, the archive has also been a significant resource for supplementing exhibition material as well as documentary film. SAJM archive started with an initial log of oral history interviews at the Kallmann Center at UCT, and it has now expanded with the aim with families who have contributed economically, socially to South African Jewish life and South Africa in general. And in the process of collecting this material, many stories have emerged, with themes ranging from Yiddish theater, medicine, migration to World War II. This has grown from small towns to big businesses. And it seemed clear that many families capturing the social history of South African Jewish community needed a place to store their material. And material that would otherwise be abandoned or discarded. So Katie is going to share our website with you today and show you how we manage this material, and then we're going to share our our video, which gives a step-by-step guide of managing your collections. Over to Katie.
Thank you, Leila. I'm going to share my screen. Leila, if you can, I think you have to make me host. Sorry. Just so I can share my screen. Okay. So this is our online archive that Leila was talking about. This is our newest, quite recently launched. And this is where we translate everyone's, the family physical collections into online family collections with photographs, documents, letters, oral histories, films, all kinds of different formats. This is the home page. This is the page you land on. And I'm just going to take you through a quick browse and show you one collection, just so you can kind of get the idea. As Leila discussed, this is the archival standard. The software that we use is the archival global standard used by galleries, museums, archives, institutions. This is the safest way to preserve our histories online. Okay, so I'm just going to take you a quick walk through just to see a little bit of what we've got at the moment. We've got around 120 collections, over 6,000 digital items that you can see. A few family collections, we've got some composite collections, we've got some institutional collections. But for now, actually what I did want to show you was the very first collection that appears here, the Abe Mervish collection. This is a great one to show you because it's got a series of photographs and documents, and it's also got a video series. That's a little bit of film and a little bit of everything, which is lovely. You can see here, it's not set up the exact same way as an ordinary website because it's archival. So it needs to have all the structures. This is for preservation and it's also for searchability. It makes it easier to find and to share. As you see, when you go down, there's many items, there's dates, there's description, there's who's donated it, there's all the kinds of archival metadata that we need for a collection, all these annoying technical terms. But here you will see in the carousel, a whole lot of beautiful photographs from the Abe Mervish family collection. Those are the photographs, and there's some documents there too. There's also a video series, and this includes a lovely clip of old film that was edited into a short clip here, which is beautiful old Cape Townian film. Once again, with all the information underneath it, this is information that we collect from the donors. You'll see in the video that I'm about to show you just how the steps to input this kind of material, because context is important, dates, names, places, all those things are very important to go with photographs, documents, and films. So that is a very, very brief walk around the site. And yes, if you, of course, we will share all the, please, any questions in the chat, and we will share all the various ways for you to get in touch with us. But the first step is our easy to follow guide, our little film guide on how to begin your journey of adding your family memory to our archive. So for now, I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to make sure that I share the sound properly. Share sound, sorry, thanks so much. Okay, share. Everybody see? Can't see? Still can't see.
Katie, yeah, I think you need to share. You need to close the archive site and then share the screen with the video.
Okay, sorry. New share. Share sound. Share. Sorry. There we go. Should be okay. Should be good to go now.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Would you like to preserve your family's history for future generations? The South African Jewish Museum and the Kallmann Center for Jewish Studies at UCT have a digital archive of Southern African Jewish communities, where your historical...
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. That was an accident.
Would you like to preserve your family's history for future generations? The South African Jewish Museum and the Kallmann Center for Jewish Studies at UCT have a digital archive of Southern African Jewish communities, where your historical records can be safely stored for generations to come. This is our step-by-step guide on how to make this possible. Step 1. Select your items. The first step is to make a selection of all the items you'd like to keep a record of. Choose the most interesting and best quality photographs that you have. Choose letters or documents that may be important to future generations. Items such as birth certificates, passports, ketubahs, wedding and bar mitzvah invitations. Select all items that have historical value and, of course, any recorded family histories. Step 2. Scan your selection. The second step is to digitize the items you've selected. If you don't have a digital scanner, contact us for a list of companies that can help you. If you are scanning the items yourself, here are a few important things to remember. Scan your photographs or documents as straight as possible. Photographs must be scanned at 600 dpi to ensure the best quality. Photographs and handwritten letters must be scanned as a TIFF file. Documents that are typed should be scanned as a PDF file. Video or film should be in MP4 format. Label each item with a unique number starting at 001. This is a critically important step and will be used later when you provide details about your collection. Save your labeled items in a folder named with your surname, followed by the word collection. Step 3. Describe your collection. The next step is to describe all your digitized items by adding whatever information you have. Your descriptions will enrich your collection, giving it context and adding insight and interest. The descriptions that are the most important are names. Try to list everyone that appears in the photos or films. Dates. Try to date your items as best you can. Places. Try to list where the images were taken. The more detail that you can provide, the more comprehensive your family collection will be. Here's an example of how simple it is to label your collection. In this Excel template, which we'll provide, we've populated it based on a collection we already have, the Wise Glass collection. The first column is number of. In this column, you will type in the unique number which you assign to each individual item you scanned, for example, item 001. The second column is title of. Here you can give a name to the first item you recorded. The third column is description of. In this column, write a brief description of your item. For example, if it's a photo, list who is in the photo, where it was taken, and what the occasion was. The fourth column is date when. Here, you should provide a date for the item you're working on. If you don't know the exact date, try to provide your best guess of the approximate year. The final column is called Summary of Collection. This is your opportunity to describe your collection as a whole. It should be an overview of what is in your collection and some background of your family history. Be sure to list any unique themes, historical moments, or family events that stand out. Finally, you need to sign a release form giving us permission to store your collection. The hard work is now over, and the next step is to get your collection to us at the museum. It's best to contact us at this point, and we'll coordinate with you the best way to send us your files. Once we've reviewed and uploaded it, we'll send you a link to your collection that you can share with your family and friends. Interested? Want to add your family collection to the archive? Email us at archives@sajewishmuseum.co.za and we'll send you an information pack and all necessary documents to complete. Mazel tov! By watching this, you've completed the first step in adding your family collection to our growing community archive, adding your chapter to South African Jewish history.
Thanks so much. I'm going to... Do I need to make you host again, Gavin? Stop sharing. Do I need to make you host?
Yeah, click on my image, Katie, and it'll on the top right, and it'll give you an opportunity to make me a host.
View. I should show you a big one, a big photo. Sorry.
So while Katie's busy making me a host, folks, if you didn't get a chance to write everything down that you saw in that little video, that is also available on the SA Jewish Museum YouTube channel, rather. And you can watch that at your leisure. Also, the contact details there are the most important, actually, because we can always help you along the way. And as the video implies, the South African Jewish Museum's digital archive platform is there to provide a vehicle for anybody who's interested to store their family history, knowing that it'll be looked after, it will be continually updated and maintained. So your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren should be able to track their family history, add to it as they go along, all through the museum. It's all very easy and not nearly as complicated as you may think it sounds. And it's a wonderful resource. It's the social history of our community, and it's also a resource that we use to develop exhibitions about the history of our community. It's really something that you can share. All right, Katie, are you winning there?
Sorry, I'm clicking in the corner there and I'm not seeing, it just says chat or pin. It doesn't say make host. Leila, you're not the host.
Okay, well, anyway, let's see, maybe I'm the host already and I missed the click. Anyway, we're going to move on.
Katie, can I help you?
Yes.
Go to participants.
Yes.
Click on Gavin's name.
More?
Yes.
Yep.
And go make co-host. Make host.
There is no option to do that.
If you look at the top right,
Because he's already the host.
Yeah, he must already be the host.
Gavin, you
okay.
are still the host. So you
All right,
Gavin,
okay.
so,
Thank you.
Thanks. You would think that
Thanks,
2 years down
Lauren.
the line of this pandemic, we'd be a lot more adept on Zoom, but
Gavin, what you can do
technology.
for all the other presenters, just make them co-host and they can still do everything they need. Don't do host. That will be better.
Okay, so well, thank you, Lauren. We're going to move on. Next up is Kallmann. As mentioned, Garrun is doing researching the history of the Union of Jewish Women for a book that she's writing. I'm going to hand over to you, Garrun, and we're going to take it from there. And off we go. I would suggest that you make, when the view gallery, make it the speaker view, which will make your life easier and be able to see things more clearly.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very excited to be here. Can you all see my screen, my presentation on the screen?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Garrun.
Great. Okay, excellent. So the topic is uncovering the lives and stories of the Union of Jewish Women. And I wanted to just start off with my personal research story, which is that I was lucky enough to study history at Rhodes pre the internet, and I spent many happy hours at the African Studies Library reading through diaries of early settlers and trying to construct a picture of their lives. And since then, the internet has been my port of call for every bit of research I've done up until this one. I had been given the history of the Cape Town branch of the Union of Jewish Women that was written by Terry Strauss in the early 1990s as a starting point for my project. It's an extremely well-written and entertaining history, but it only covers Cape Town. And I really wanted to write about the Union of Jewish Women as a national organization. I started, and the first thing I did obviously was look on the internet. And I was disappointed that there was barely anything about the history of the UJW on the internet. There were a few articles for the Jewish Women's Archive and those kinds of generic Jewish history sites, but nothing else. And I searched the names of the women that appeared often in Terry Strauss's history, and absolutely nothing came up. And so my next step was to approach members of the organization, start interviewing them, and capture their historical memory. So in terms of the uncovering part of this process, my first thing was looking at the internet, as I said, which revealed nothing. I then looked at previously written histories, which included Terry Strauss's history. I looked at the Jewish life in the South African country communities. I contacted all the branches to find out whether any of them had written histories, and some of them had. I did a few interviews, not enough, unfortunately. As I was mentioning to someone yesterday, I had a list of people I wanted to interview, and then lockdown happened. And during that period, very sadly, many of the people I wanted to interview passed on. So that was a really huge missed opportunity. I used Katie helped me a lot at the Kaplan Center Library. They have a very well catalogued collection, and I was able to, just before lockdown, work in the Jagger Library through that and through those documents. I also went to the Gitlin Library. They have a small archive section, and they had a few books that I could use. But the most useful archive I found was the South African Jewish Board of Deputies Library at the Yachad. And I have gone on 3 trips there. The reason it was so useful for me is that the Union of Jewish Women collection is stored there. So when branches closed, or they would send all their materials up to this library, and a previous secretary at the UJW had put in a lot of work in labeling all the materials, putting them in boxes, labeling the boxes, and that was extremely useful. Unfortunately, nothing had been digitized at that point. And so that most of my time was spent scanning documents, photographs, information, pretty much in the way that you saw in the previous video. And because the archive there, I mean, it's got a huge amount of material, but it's not an ideal archive like the Kaplan Center Library is. It isn't, air conditioned, etc. And there's a lot of, the shelves are sagging a little bit, and some of the minutes from meetings and those kinds of things were pasted on, and they starting to disintegrate. So I'm very invested in trying to make sure that as much as possible of that library gets digitized before that information is lost. So other sources of information that were useful were, going through the archive, because there was so much stuff. There's about 4 huge bookshelves of information, boxes, files, that kind of thing at the Yachad archive. I had to look for things like celebratory publications, like special anniversary booklets, Silver Jubilee, Golden Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee. What I forgot to mention at the beginning of my talk is that the UJW is 91 years old this year. So there were many celebratory events and publications, and they were a really good starting point in terms of looking at where I wanted to find out more information. They kind of gave broad brush strokes of what the UJW had done, and then I could investigate and search further from then. Very fortunately, the UJW also published their own journal in the 1950s called the Contemporary Review, which is really fascinating, both from a sociological point of view, because it looks at what we're interested in during the 1950s, mainly in the areas of education and welfare work. And so the articles are really interesting. And also a lot of articles about Israel. And what was of particular interest to me was that there was a summary from each branch of the Union of Jewish Women that was put in those contemporary reviews. So it was a fantastic starting point in finding out what the different branches were doing in terms of activities. They also, over the time, put in news sheets, and there were also articles in the Jewish Affairs. Apologies for this typo there. There were also minutes of meetings. I couldn't go through all the minutes, but I picked national executive meetings where branches also gave reports. And then there were periods of time where newspaper articles were archived, and that also was extremely interesting. So the woman part of it, I decided to just focus on 3 women from the early history to share with you a little bit about them. The first has to be Toni Safra, because she is the woman who founded the Union of Jewish Women in 1931. She was a multi-talented musician, and she was a committed social activist. She was inspired by the German feminist Jüdische Frauenbund, the League of Jewish Women, with the idea of an umbrella organization to coordinate the philanthropic work of Jewish women in South Africa. She herself was involved in many organizations, including the National Council of Women from 1911, the Society for, was called Feeble-Minded until 1914, the St. John's Ambulance Association from 1915 to 1930, and she also nursed at Somerset Hospital and at the District 6 Military Hospital during World War I. But the gap that she identified was that there were no Jewish organizations that undertook philanthropic work both within the Jewish community as well as in the wider community, amongst communities of colored and Black people living in South Africa. And in 1929, she decided to approach the South Deputies for Assistance to establish a nationwide association of Jewish women. So the resolution was duly passed amongst cheers from those present, but it was never implemented. So Safra went ahead and, assisted by women sympathetic to the idea, called a public meeting in 1931. And in August 1931, the first branch of the Union of Jewish Women was formed in Johannesburg. And it wasn't uncontroversial at all. There were many Jewish women's organizations, and many felt threatened by the creation of this organization. They didn't like the idea of being coordinated, of having, to kind of coordinate fundraising and activities and whatever. But nonetheless, she was really a force to be reckoned with. And within the following few years, there were branches in Cape Town, Bloemfontein, Oudtshoorn, and East London. I think the person who really pushed the Union of Jewish Women forward more than anyone else was Sally Castle, and she has largely been forgotten. In fact, I have not met another person, and I've spoken to many about her, who's even heard of her name. So in 1945, she became the paid organizing secretary, later called the national organizer of the Union of Jewish Women, and she entered into this work with a lot of enthusiasm. She was born in Oudtshoorn. Her grandparents were immigrants from Lithuania, and they were very integrated into the Oudtshoorn Jewish community. The Oudtshoorn community generally, they were bilingual. They spoke English and Afrikaans. And during her 16 years in the position of national organizer, she developed the UJW from 20 branches to 62, establishing branch in Rhodesia, in Salisbury, and Bulawayo, and in Windhoek, in the former Southwest Africa. She was very committed to the National Council of Women of South Africa, and as she started Union of Jewish Women branches in all the small towns, she encouraged them to affiliate to the National Council of Women. And through this, she forged links between Jewish women and other women in the community. She was the first person to inaugurate goodwill meetings under the joint auspices of the National Council of Women and the Union of Jewish Women throughout the whole subcontinent. And in all the centers, she had platforms where leading men and women of the time would address these groups. She recorded the number of time meetings, and in her 16 years of national organizer of the UJW, she addressed 478 meetings. And we're very lucky to have quite a number of her speeches which have been preserved on handwritten, some typed on that very thin tissue paper. And fortunately, I have managed to scan those speeches. She was involved in many other organizations apart from the NCW and the UJW. The South African Board of Deputies she sat on for many years, the United Association of South Africa, Magen David Adom, Women's Zionist League, Johannesburg Business and Professional Women's Club. She's a qualified accountant and had worked as an accountant before joining the UJW, South African Institute of Race Relations, the League of Nations, followed by the United Nations Association of South Africa. One of her proudest moments was sitting at the talks in just outside New York, discussing of Palestine, Israel. So she actually sat in for 2 weeks on those talks. She was an observer. I've got the letters where she's asked for permission to observe. And she was very disappointed because 2 days after she returned to South Africa, the state of Israel was declared, but she wasn't at that particular meeting. And she later on, she became very interested in refugee issues, migration. One of her leading campaigns was making migrants to South Africa feel welcome, creating support groups for them and those kinds of things. And she's really, I think she was quite a remarkable woman. The third woman I want to just speak about briefly is Sarah Sloman. She was elected the national president of the UJW in 1940 and served until 1947, and then again took the presidency from 1950 to 1954. And her passion was women's rights under Jewish law. And she was particularly concerned about the issue of agonot, chained women who can't marry either because their husband has disappeared and there's no proof of death, which happened after World War I in large numbers, and also obviously during the Holocaust. And she was appointed the chairman of the subcommittee of the legal status of Jewish women in the ICJW and worked to make other countries aware of the problem. And it was through her perseverance that the matter of reinterpretation of the relevant laws by Orthodox rabbis was raised at various international conferences. And the one issue that she wasn't able to influence was that now in Israel, when a soldier goes off to war, he lodges a conditional get with his rabbi, so that if he goes missing, there is a way for that woman to be released without his body necessarily being found. Her work on the subject of women's disabilities under law has been recognized, and there was a research scholarship at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem known for Sloman Scholarship. So those are just very brief comments about these three women that I discovered and was very inspired by through working through the archive. Looking just quickly at the stories, so the Union of Jewish Women has always risen to the challenges of the time. And in the 1940s, they were very involved in war work, which included assisting everything from assisting refugees to knitting clubs and sending knitted garments overseas, to raising money to buy ambulances and a mobile field laboratory and equipping beds in all the auxiliary hospitals. The effort was really where the UJW shone, because they coordinated the work of all Jewish women's organizations that were working for the war effort. They actually created lists of women who were working for the war effort all over the country. They set up incredible canteens at the ports in Durban and Cape Town to feed passing soldiers. They also set up entertainment halls, and it was really the time when the union grew the most in numbers, because everybody obviously felt drawn to doing something, and the union drew them in, and then managed to sustain this after the war. I mean, there was a lot of work to be done after the war as well, and they managed to sustain a lot of the interest of these women in doing good work at that time. The other area that the union has always been involved is education, from the creche to university and beyond. So the union was always involved in early childhood development. The Kensington creche was started in 1941, and the top picture is of that, but there were creches in all small towns and cities, and wherever the union was, they would support those schools either through feeding or through providing teachers. And it didn't stop there. There were high school bursaries given. Children were helped to get through school. There were always bursaries. There was a fund set up to help African nurses. And I, in fact, was a beneficiary of the Tony Safran, Fanny and Shalom Backham bursary for when I studied development studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So across the spectrum, and then of course the union's also very well known for its adult education. The union really saw it as a way of empowering women, exposing them to all kinds of everything from Bible classes to popular psychology to hard skills. A very inspiring amount of work that was done in the field of education. And then obviously to keep the organization going, there was a lot of creative fundraising. So on the one side of the picture, Kimberly hosted a parachute debate, and on the right is a play reading, which was a fundraiser. But there were incredible things that were done. Like, I'll just read you about 5 from this list, just so you could get an idea. But they had like Mad Hatter's tea parties. They had concerts, running stalls at fairs, cookbook sales, floral demonstrations, nightclubs, April Fool's dance, gay 90s cabaret, etc. It was a very, it was a very creative time. And I guess I want to just end off by saying that I would really like, I'm writing this book, but my vision is to have an interactive website where people can upload their own stories of their involvement, or their parents or their grandparents' involvement in the Union of Jewish Women, because I think that a lot of people have personal archives and information that would really enrich and build the story of this remarkable organization. So thank you, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Garrun. We're also privileged to have Bev Goldman, the national chair of the Union of Jewish Women, with us.
National president.
So national president, sorry, I stand corrected. So if, David Seif, did I see you put your hand up? No, okay, sorry, just stretching. If anybody has any particular questions for Garrun, or would like to know a little bit more about her research, we'll take 1 or 2 questions now, and then we'll move on to, oh, sorry, I see a couple of hands up. First is Geraldine. Geraldine.
I now understand what he said. My name is Adam Mendelsohn, because Adam kindly sent me the link because I was struggling. So I just wanted to thank Karen, because it was wonderful. She discovered, do you remember, that my mother, Beryl Kretzmar, had written the history of the Union of Jewish Women in Kimberley. And I only had it up to a certain time, but Karen transcribed it, and right up to the 1980s, which I was very thrilled with. And now, because I had a lot of photographs and newspaper cuttings from my mother, I've put that together. And we have on the Kimberley website a very nice article of the Union of Jewish Women in Kimberley, thanks to Karen and her work. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Geraldine. Veronica, I see you've got your hand up as well. You're going to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, that's what I did. Thank you. Karen, I was interested there that the name of Sally Kussel, or I don't know how you pronounce her name, Sally Kussel from Oudtshoorn, because just recently I was contacted by somebody. Is he doing a PhD on, it's something to do with these Polish evacuees in Oudtshoorn. And I'd never ever heard of such a thing. So I just wondered, you know, via Sally Kussel, if you'd like to comment on that. And I can't remember what his name is, person who's doing the PhD.
I think it was on the, yeah. Was it
Veronica, that was, sorry, me jumping in, I know who it was. It was Sean O'Sullivan who has uncovered.
It's Stephen somebody or other.
Okay.
Who's doing his doctorate.
Okay, I know that Sean O'Sullivan, who will be speaking in our third session, has uncovered footage from the African Mirror archive from the 1940s of these orphans arriving and being housed in Oudtshoorn.
Hi, Gavin. Sorry to interrupt. It's Joy Cropman.
Hi, Joy.
Many years ago, I did an exhibition in Johannesburg on the Union of Jewish Women. And it's such a long time ago, I can't remember the year, but it was for some celebration. It was a very big photographic exhibition. And maybe, Karen, you might be able to find some photographs or things amongst that if you can speak to one of the Johannesburg Union of Jewish Women. They exhibited that exhibition a few times, but it's a long time ago. It must have been, about, I don't know, the 90s or early 20. I can't even remember it, so long ago.
Joy, can I ask you, because I have come across an exhibition on aspects of Jewish life that was done a few times. I don't know if it was that or was it specifically about the Union of Jewish Women?
No, it was a specific one on
really?
Union of Jewish Women. And I don't know where, you know, the trouble is, I don't know where they housed it or what happened afterwards. They asked me to do it, you know, and I got all the information. But after that, it, you know, it belonged to them and I don't know what happened to it. So if you could speak to one of them. All right, but congratulations on what you've done so far. You really have done an extensive amount of research and well done.
Thanks, Joy. Bev, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, this time it's actually up. A thought came to me referring to the SA Jewish Board of Deputies at Beyachad. Were the books and the archive material of Beit Hatzafutot, were they consulted at all? Because that's also housed there in the same premises. And I think they their research is mainly on country communities and the people who lived there, etc. But I thought maybe there's something to do with organizations like the Union of Jewish Women as well.
Yes, yes. Actually, my mom-in-law, Gwynne, who's going to be speaking next, gave me the Cape books. And then when I went to the archive, they had all the others. I went through all of them. And it actually was really useful because they just had a line, but often that line was something I didn't have. They'd have like when it was started, who was the first chairperson, you know, that kind of information. So thank you. I did actually have a look at all of them that they've written so far. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Bev?
Thank you, Gavin. I think I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm I've been told that the Union of Jewish Women, which, as Karen says, is celebrating its 91st year and is completely remarkable. And my mother was involved, and I was involved in a small town, and now I stand on the shoulders of such giants. It's incredible. But I believe it's the only Jewish organization that has consistently worked in both the Jewish and the wider communities. And I think that the involvement of the Union of Jewish Women has, to a large extent, educated many people around South Africa on the Jewish community and what they have done and how valuable they have been in assisting those in need. And I just think, you know, from that point of view, obviously from the Jewish point of view is wonderful, but remarkable to have done so much in the wider outreach community. And I'm not sure if other organizations have done it, but I do know that, having come across people over the years, when you say you're a member of the Jewish community, a lot of them have said Union of Jewish Women, and there's not much else that they know about Jewish. So, you know, it sounds like it could be the right thing, that we are the only organization. And before I go, I just have to tell you that Karen is a dream, and she has brought the most unbelievable professionalism to the organization, and I am more than privileged to be able to work with her. So thank you, Karen. Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you, Bev. I think we're going to move on to our last speaker of the day, Gwen Robbins. Gwen, as I mentioned, is the Deputy Director of the Board of Deputies in Cape Town, a fount of knowledge when it comes to the Jewish community and the history, particularly here in Cape Town. I lean on her knowledge constantly. So I'm going to hand over to you, Gwynne.
Thank you very much. And please keep it on. I don't want to have to worry about it. You keep on being the host. And I just want to agree totally with Bev. I think Bev is very, very lucky to have Karen. They have got somebody with initiative and drive and ability, and so far she's been an amazing chair. So, and now and on top of it all, she has 5 children to lift, and she still has the time to do everything. So, Bev, you're very lucky to have her. Anyway, I'm going to be discussing the pros and cons of online history websites. A spoiler alert: I love reading on paper. I like turning the pages. I enjoy the smell of new books, the quality of the paper, the illustrations, the bindings. I used to look forward to the arrival of Jewish Affairs, a wide-ranging historical, cultural, and current affairs journal produced by the Jewish Board of Deputies, which I'd read from cover to cover. Then, if it contains an article of mine, and sometimes it contains articles from Veronica, and sometimes it contains articles from Joy and from Sorrel, who's on here, and I would then place it on the bookshelf next to its mates. Now that Jewish Affairs comes as an online publication, the excitement of its arrival has gone. It's just something else that's popped up on my computer screen. I skim through it, note articles that I intend to read someday, then turn to something else and forget about it. There are too many other articles on my computer to distract my attention. Admittedly, I miss absorbing a great deal of information this way, but reading on screen doesn't retain my interest like reading on paper does. One can have too much of a good thing and can suffer from excess exposure to screen time. However, we must live in the present and the future, and online represents that future. For the publishers, e-journals are cheaper because the main cost of preparing the text, the review process, and other similar procedures are not as capital intensive as the cost of printing and mailing copies. So, despite my complaints, I must admit I'd rather have a Jewish Affairs e-journal than no journal at all. But online journals like Jewish Affairs are closed, limited to those articles that the editor has selected for the current issue. Online history websites like Gerald Auerbach's Kimberley and Dave Bloom's Zimbabwe websites are open-ended and invite community participation from people who trace their roots to the particular town or shtetl. They can contribute nuggets of information about the history that otherwise would be lost and help to construct a larger picture. I shall give you an example
of how websites can help one to become connected to people all over the world who share common interests or places of origin. The Cape Town Holocaust Center asked me for advice about an orange metal box shown to them by Sarah Nuskalis from California. The center was hosting an exhibition by her husband of 15 large drawings of aerial views of death camps called 14 Stations, a Kaddish for Shoah victims. They were both Polish Jews who had been small children in the Bergen-Belsen displaced persons camp. Clearing out the wardrobe of her recently deceased father, Sarah had found a box marked in Yiddish above a map of Southern Africa, a gift from your brothers and sisters in South Africa. Inside was a label in English and Yiddish, South African Jewish War Appeal, P.O. Box 5991, Johannesburg, South Africa, with a Yiddish message. If you want to write to us, we will answer with pleasure. The donor was Mrs. G. Levis, care of 67 Duncan Road, Bulawayo. I told Sarah that the Jewish War Appeal had been established in Johannesburg in 1941, the same year that the Jewish Affairs was, by the Board of Deputies and the Zionist Fed. And the boxes sent to the DP camps had contained items like soap, jam, raisins, chocolates, and socks. The tin had made such a difference to their lives in the camp that Sarah's father had kept it all his life, and Sarah wanted to thank Mrs. Levis. I contacted the Bulawayo Hebrew congregation, Rabbi Silberhaft, the traveling rabbi, the Jewish press. No one had heard of Mrs. Levis. Then I found a Bulawayo website and soon got a response from a man in England who used to play with Mrs. Levis's children who lived around the corner from them in Bulawayo. He put me in touch with the late Mrs. Levis's son, who was dumbfounded. They weren't Jewish. His mother had evacuated the family from London during the war to Bulawayo for safety. Neither he nor his sister had any idea that their mother had contributed to help Jewish refugees. I put the delighted Sarah in touch with the Levis children, and they arranged to meet them in London the next time they were in England. This is what an online website of connected people can do. It can bring people together in a way that nothing else can, so that they can share information not otherwise available. This connection would have been impossible in the past. Another spoiler alert is that I feel passionately about the importance of recording history. So I really appreciated the dedicated work that Garrun is doing on the Union of Jewish Women, on the Freiburg community that kept Gary Sussman busy during COVID-19. I'm all too aware how quickly information is forgotten. So if it becomes too expensive to produce a printed document, then online versions, as are now produced by the Isaac and Jessie Kaplan Center of Jewish Studies, through its web exhibitions and the Jewish Board of Deputies with their journal Jewish Affairs, are the next best thing. But the history must be accurate, and memories aren't always. I have noticed the deterioration of details when I've arranged for a once Holocaust survivor to retell her memories to a seniors group over a 10-year period. Assisting at the videoing of another one, I had to remind her of important things she had omitted. Previously, she had told me of being deported as a child, and standing at the station, her beautiful older cousin was taken around the back by some soldiers and returned the next morning weeping. The second time around, she had no recall of the event at all. Childhood memories are often not accurate, as children lack the background information and insight to process the facts correctly, or are shielded from the truth, so the second or third-hand information provided on these websites are often not correct and glorified. Gone is the early poverty and the struggles, and of course, all their ancestors were successful and respected. One example are smoses. There is a romance in the story of the Smose ancestor that is lacking in the story of the cobbler, tailor, or carpenter ancestor. Most Lithuanian Jews were artisans and used their skills to develop the footwear, clothing, and furniture industries. I have researched this in articles and found contemporary statistics from South Africa, America, Canada, and the UK, which all show how few of our ancestors made their living as peddlers. I've recently been involved in writing a history of a Hebrew congregation that, when completed, will be an online document. Much information came from interviews from old timers conducted by the compiler, all given with sincerity and enthusiasm. However, I found so many errors, particularly with dates and names. Different people credited the same event to different individuals. And if the information was to be believed, the CHOL was built long before the land was bought. Fortunately, I had found the title deeds online, or else the wrong year would have become the accepted history. Had it just gone on a website, the mistake would never have been picked up. Printed sources usually have the benefit of some type of quality control before publication, so one can trust the content of the articles in Jewish Affairs or on the Kaplan Center websites more than one can necessarily trust the content of a website that relies on the enthusiasm of people willing to share stories of their ancestors' past. The former is carefully reviewed and checked for accuracy and requires references. The latter relies on memory. Unlike printed journal articles, websites devoted to a particular town or interest are not necessarily checked for accuracy before the information is put online and don't require footnotes to back up the information supplied. They rely on the accuracy of the informant's memory. When I wrote to say an article on the Kimberley website on the first girls to have a bat mitzvah was incorrect, Geraldine responded that I was far too young to have had an earlier bat mitzvah, and the paper that recorded my bat mitzvah couldn't have been the Diamond Field Advertiser, as I had claimed with a much later Cape Town paper. Now, who knew my age better, me or the source Geraldine had quoted? And this wasn't the only such error found, and this is why a printed thing is so much more accurate. One is only as accurate as one's sources, and these sources, when relying on fallible memory, are not always reliable. The Board of Deputies, which looks after the defunct country communities, asked me to write short histories about some of those communities for our monthly online newspaper, the Cape Jewish Chronicle. An invaluable resource for anyone putting together an online history of those towns, as I'm so happy that so many of you are doing, and that David Seep has remarked on, and Karen has remarked on, are the volumes of the Jewish life of the South African country communities researched by the South African Friends of Beit HaTfutzot. The team has spent many years going through early documents and give the details of the establishment, the building of the synagogue, Talmud Torah, cemetery, the foundings of the communal organizations like the Union of Jewish Women, even the names of the Jewish families who had lived in those small towns. I would recommend to anyone compiling an online communal history of their community to get hold of the document or the volume dealing with the town. But even they, despite their years of intense research, are only as reliable as their sources. My very short chronicle articles came with an inbuilt rebel factor. How could I have left out somebody's great-grandfather or their great-uncle's third cousin? People not even mentioned in the Beit HaTfutzot books. I've offered to publish the additional information if they sent it to me. One angry woman responded that she had better things to do than waste her time writing to me about her great uncle, and we should have known better, and Beit HaTfutzot must republish the volume adding him in. So the great uncle's his contribution to Pampunfontein will remain unacknowledged. And here is where your online community history websites come in, as they will enable people to record the stories of those forgotten by history. The machas are remembered, as are the chairpersons, the donors, the founders of the synagogues, the cheders, the cemeteries, the Zionist organizations, the youth organizations, the big industrialists. But the names of the majority, the little people, the Gwynners, struggling to support their families in their little towns, are often unreported. This is the benefit of your online history websites. You can publish their stories contributed by your members. There are no costs for the publication process. Corrections can be speedily made. The forgotten people can be brought to life. There's wider accessibility to the interested reader, but the accuracy of the information must be checked, as well as the spelling. An essential part of online history project is continuity. It's important to keep the quality and the interest ongoing, because to many of its readers who enjoy the nostalgia reading the content brings, online communities may feel like home, a family of invisible friends. with shared common interests. It enables them to reconnect to their past, to their youth, with all the warm memories associated with their childhood in that little town. By providing input and support, these websites also enable the members to reconnect primarily via the internet with those friends who've been lost through the years, through marriages and moves to cities or immigration. Dave Bloom puts it very well when he states that the success of the Zimbabwe project and website would depend on input and the support from many different sources, including all the current and former members, and the same would go for all such community-based websites. Dave also adds that members would be kept informed on updates and their details would remain confidential and would not be given to any third parties. This is important to remember, especially with the recent Protection of Personal Information Act. But when the interest of the founder fades, it is often difficult to find someone to keep the site going. It is of vital importance to find someone to take over the responsibility of keeping it up and making it happen. There needs to be someone to put out the information. The way Geraldine has done in her Kimberley website is an excellent example. She maintains interest by updating it regularly, asking for information on specific areas, on businesses, on war, on sport. However, these articles have to be checked. There are many errors. Now comes a warning. Cyber attacks are an increasing possibility. These can be brought to teenagers, people with a gripe against the organization, or deliberately organized attacks on Jewish Alliance sites. Hackers try corrupting websites with propaganda messages. Don't think it doesn't happen. It does. Last year, affected websites displayed a video simulating Israeli cities being bombed and messages threatening the destruction of the Jewish state. South Africa, according to Interpol's African Cyber Threat Assessment Report, has the third highest number of cybercrime victims in the world. In the first quarter of 2021, South Africa was the worst affected on the continent in terms of targeted ransomware attacks, with 230 million threat detections, of which 219 million detections were related to email threats. My cousin in her 80s was a victim, and when she refused to pay, had her computer wiped clean. South Africa has the third highest number of cybercrime victims worldwide. There are more than 500 million internet users across the continent of Africa. In an October 2021 response to parliamentary questions about a cyber attack on Transnet and on the Justice and Constitutional Development Departments caused by ransomware strains known variously as Death Kitty, Hello Kitty, and Five Hands, Pravin Gordon said that all information and community technology systems had to be shut down to stop the spread of malware. Some servers and some workstations that were online at the time of the attack were encrypted by the ransomware, he said. These had probably been carried out by Eastern European or Russian criminals, although they're probably far too busy targeting poor Ukraine at the moment. On the 1st of December 2021, the Cyber Crimes Act came into force, making the unlawful and intentional access of a computer system an offence, but I don't know what effect it will have. So please be careful. It would be dreadful if all the carefully collected information that the webmaster has spent hours laying out vanishes in a moment. So store the information in the cloud. One final suggestion. Community history online doesn't exist in isolation. There is an organization called South African History Online, run by an independent board of directors, made up of historians and interested people. Its aim is to promote history and make knowledge accessible through the creation of a comprehensive online encyclopedia of South African and African history. It wants to provide a platform for people to tell their stories, which is exactly what you are doing here. South African History Online wants to develop partnerships with community-based history projects, which is what you are. So it might be a good idea to connect with them, investigate what partnership would involve, and whether there would be any benefits from what you could learn from them. And thank you. And thank you to everybody here for all the amazing work that you do. You really are being very important, ensuring that history is not forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwynne. And that was very informative. And as you were speaking, it struck me that a lot of the points that you touched on are thankfully well dealt with the SAJM archives, which Leila and Katie spoke to earlier. Things around enthusiasm and accuracy before any family or any organization can upload onto our archive. We go through all the information to check for the accuracy. The fact that we do it as family histories, we're able to record the histories of Joe Schmo versus the Machers, and also by going through your family history, looking at the documents, you have that sort of trigger of nostalgia as well. But you are quite correct in the dangers of online. Me personally, I feel that the benefits outweigh the negative effects of online. Particularly, I mean, we're not, the people on this call are not representative of the next generation. But when I look at my children and the way they interact in the world, screens are rapidly replacing books as the main source of education, of information, of just interacting and discovering. That's the length. Those are our speakers for today, folks. If anybody has any particular questions or anything they would like to raise, now's your time. Everybody on this call has an interest in South African Jewish history, whether it be in the online space or niched for a particular town or place or organization. So feel free to speak. I see, Geraldine, your hand is up, so I'm going to give you first shot at it.
Thanks. I wanted to say thank you to Gwynne, and I must make a public apology to her. I have apologized to you privately. I interpreted her date of arriving in Kimberley as her date of birth. Hence, I thought she was 6 years younger than she said she was. But obviously, I should have inquired rather than assumed. And I often spell Schrire wrongly also. But I think despite that, we have an ongoing interactive way of putting things right and learning new things because of that. So thank you for putting so succinctly the pros and cons of online and hard copy publication, and long live both of them. Thanks,
you. Thanks, Geraldine. One other thing I'd like to add about the benefit of these type of engagements and connections between us is the link that Joy Cropman just gave to Garrun in terms of her search for information on UJW. Garrun wasn't aware of the exhibition. We have Joy here, and she worked in one 25 years ago or so. But this is the point of this whole program: the opportunity for people to connect and share and help each other. Garrun, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just a quick observation. It's just something I've been grappling with through the research process. When you spoke about, memory, and written information and that kind of thing, I've always really appreciated the written material more than the interviews because of what you say. People remember things differently. I mean, I interview people about the same event and I get different stories, and then it's very hard to figure out exactly what the real story is. But I also know from personal experience, like that minutes are often also a reflection of whoever's checking those minutes. So I know I've discussed this with my husband. He was the chairman of a CHOL, and I, am the chair of the UJW Cape Town, and someone writes up the minutes, and then we as chairs go through them and kind of choose what, how things are said, or, what tone and all that kind of thing. So I just wanted to say that. I mean, I think any history is just like one reflection or one picture of what that is, because there's always the subjective element and people hear things differently, not only say things differently. Yeah, just something I've been thinking about.
Sorrel, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to comment and say thank you very much to everyone. It's been wonderful. And just apropos the idea of being accurate, when I've attended conferences here in London, they've insisted that you must be accurate because there are so many people willing to pick holes in Holocaust articles and the details of the Shoah. So they must be accurate for that reason as well.
Thank you, Sorrel. You're quite right. I don't see anybody else with their sort of virtual hand up. I don't know if anyone has anything else to share. If not, Stephen, your hand is up. Stephen? Hello? Okay, well, that may be a mistake.
Okay, sorry, I
there
had
we go.
trouble. I had trouble unmuting. It's early. It's not that early. It's 9:20 a.m. So you know the right off of that, and from my accent. To you, I have an accent, right? Do I? I'd like to hear what it sounds like. Well, I'll ask my cousins. That's from King David High School, and when I see them shortly, hopefully soon before Pesach, I'm in Toronto, so that's where I am. And I got this link a while ago, and it came up somewhere, and I lost it for many weeks. And I couldn't remember the organization or where it was. And today it just pops up as I woke up this morning, and my wife's going to Aqua Fitness, and here I am in this conference. So I'm not sure exactly what it is. I remember when I registered that it's 2 sessions. I don't know, is the next one, you can tell me, is next week. And what does the acronym stand for? South African Jewish what, genealogy or what, history or something like that? So you obviously know that I know many of my cousins who went to your famous King David High School in Melbourne, Toronto, and San Diego, especially. And I know you have communities of expatriates or Jews in Boston as well, I believe. I think that, I don't know if that covers the where your diaspora is.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so firstly, SAJM stands for the South African Jewish Museum. We're based here in Cape Town. These sessions we've entitled Community History Online, and we use the CHOL as an abbreviation for it. And you are quite right, there are some more sessions. There are 2 more sessions in this iteration. And in fact, Stephen, this is for you in the US. Next week's session is going to start at 8 p.m. It's not going to be during the afternoon. And this is to allow people on the West Coast and East Coast of the US also to partake. Geraldine, I see your hand is up, but you've already spoken. So I'm going to just ask Laura to...
I just want to mention one other thing. So that'll be, of course, noon in California. First of all, you know my cousin, Sydney and Robin Reb, okay, Rebbe, if you're in Cape Town, but you're not necessarily in Cape Town. And my dear friend, Edwin Alkin, lives in Dublin, Ireland. His father is turning 100 in Toronto in a few weeks, be 100 years old. But Edwin is doing what you do. He is restored the museum in Dublin, Ireland, as we speak, and it opened 2 weeks ago. There's a lot more work to do. So to preserve our history, wherever we have been, is of the utmost importance to pass on to our future generations. So I hope to continue joining you in the next sessions and to contribute and learn about my ancestors, the Harris family and the Joel family, Joel, which is Jolofsky or whatever, so that I can link up with more of my family there in Cape Town, Joburg, and and Bloemfontein, and I lived on the same street as Sir Roy Walensky, who was, of course, in a neighboring country, and his brother was my doctor in Toronto, Bunny Walensky.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Laura.
Hi, thank you very much. It's really interesting. What I wanted to ask is, my father-in-law was a rabbi, as Geraldine knows, in Kimberley for a number of years, and then in Rhodesia. And I have got a huge file of his sermons and papers, and I wasn't sure if that would be something that I could pass on to you or archive with you, or.
Well, the beauty of our archive is that each person who contributes controls their own collection.
Okay.
So we could, well, you would scan them, but we would upload and keep them, and they would be under the Conviser collection, and you can choose what to keep up there and what not. By the sounds of things, if you've got his old sermons and so on, I imagine that would be of historical significance to researchers, and it should be kept safe. I see Prof. Mendelsohn. Adam, you put your hand up.
Thanks, Governor. Just let me respond, Laura, to your point as well, that we as Katie and Leila described to begin with, there's a collaborative partnership between the South African Jewish Museum and the Kallmann Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Cape Town, where there is a digital archive, but the Kallmann Center also has a physical archive. So it sounds like in your case, these papers would be of considerable interest. And obviously there's the potential to digitize the material, but also if you're looking for a home a place to preserve the material for posterity, we'll be interested as well. That's
okay.
Again,
I mean, some of it is on little scraps of paper typed on, also this flimsy. Some of it are sermons from, synagogue, Sabbath, and some of them are talks or that he's given to communal activities as well.
So it just sounds very interesting to get a sense of what's being said, in sermons, and particularly someone with a career like his, which sort of literally crosses borders. It would be. Yeah. It sounds like something of historical interest.
All right. How would I get physical documents? I'd have to bring them sometime.
We would absolutely. We can talk about that separately, but absolutely we can make a plan. I mean, either to have them shipped or for them to be brought, but something okay. And obviously this is true for anyone else on the call who's participating, that if you have material of historical interest, things that you think would be of broader interest, that there are these two routes, that certainly digitalization, and likewise, if there are things that you don't want to yourself be ultimately responsible for, we have a physical archive which is full of material of historical significance.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And I can vouch for the wonderful file that is. It's a very thick file, beautifully preserved. I think originally by Converser himself, Rabbi Converser himself, and his family.
My mother-in-law.
and there are newspaper articles. There are adverts for talks that he's giving, and really, really interesting. And we made a very interesting story of Rabbi Converser on the website. But I also wanted to point out that Kimberley website is a partnership. It's not me, it's Geraldine and Eli. And we work together so well on creating this website. I couldn't have done anything without Eli, who is the one who posts everything on the website. And together we've worked out a template of how to post things so that they hopefully easy to find, and that you can find easily and enjoy. So thank you to Eli, and not forgetting you ever.
Well, I just want to say that Geraldine finds me very easily. I'm here. I'm waiting for your next email.
Margaret, I see you have your hand up.
Mute. Yes. Well, just because I heard Professor Mendelssohn talk about the Kallmann archive, I just want to ask, I mean, I've just recently written a history of my mother's family. A lot of it came, not all of it, but some of it came from an interview that the Kallmann Center did with her in the 1980s. And I've been wondering what to do with this piece of writing. And I'm just wondering if that's the right place to send it, given that there is already some material there.
Absolutely. I mean, we'd love to have it. So I mean, and that again, true for anyone else who's participating, that if you have work that you yourself have done, which reflects on, published work which reflects on South African Jewish history, we have an extensive library which is used by researchers, and if you think it's likely to be useful to those thinking and writing about South African Jewish history, please share it. I should also, though, Margaret, just to add one since you raised this, one additional element, which is that one of the things that we've done over the last few years is to digitize this really extraordinary collection of hundreds of interviews done by the Kallmann Center in the early 1980s, primarily in Cape Town and Johannesburg, and with people at the time who were elderly. And we have both the transcripts of those interviews, extensive interviews, life histories, which were done at the time, and also the audio recordings as well of many of these interviews too. And we've now, as I said, we've digitized that material, and that material is now available to researchers because of the POPIA Act introduced in South Africa. We can't make this material, we can't just put it onto the internet, but there certainly the finding aids to identify who's been interviewed, and the indexes are available to anyone who's interested. But if you're interested in listening to these interviews, to reading the transcripts, just contact us and we will happily share them. And they are, as Margaret can testify to this, attest to this, that they are extraordinary life histories and containing all sorts of things about people's backgrounds, which historians and researchers would love to know. So again, a shout out in a way to anyone who's interested in this material, that it's available and we want people to use it.
Great, thank you.
I've just noted in the chat, Margaret, you can see that Katie has kindly put up a link to the collection that Adam's just been speaking about.
I'm talking on behalf of the opposition, Margaret. If you've written it in a document that's interesting, the Jewish Affairs is always very happy to publish interesting stories of people. Okay. I'm on the board, and if you'd like to send it to them, David Sachs would decide whether to put it on, because this way it gets to a wider readership. And it can still go in the Kallmann Center's archives.
Afterwards. Oh, well, it's nice. It's nice to have competition over something I wrote.
Yeah, there's also the South African Genealogy Special Interest Group Journal that Roy August writes. And they are interested in publishing this kind of article as well. Roy will be talking about this on the next session. So that's the 8 o'clock South African time session next Wednesday.
Katie, I see you've got your hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to, as you'll see, I'll put many links here. I'll add my email address in the chat as well. But Margaret, we have, and everybody else, we have in the last year or so added a few written histories, memoirs, that kind of thing, to SAJM archives. And it's wonderful because people have been asking us, saying they have struggled to find first person writings. And we have quite a few up, and we want to add more because it's become a hub of places to find this kind of thing. So it's very, very easy for us to put up a digital copy. We can discuss physical copies, physical archiving, that kind of thing as well. But it's quite simple with that kind of to add a PDF which becomes searchable. It's a very, very good place to add your histories if you don't mind it being online. I will add I did put our email address here, but I'll add mine too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing? We've set up an interactive email list called for CHOL, or Community History Online. And if you're not on it and you'd like to be, if you want to send me your email, I can put you on, or you can find a way to get onto it yourself. And then you can pose questions and you can interact with other people on the list. There are about 100 people on the list at the moment, but I don't think many of you are on it. So if you'd like to be, I can just put my email here. And if you email me, which is basically geraldine.auerbach@gmail.com.
And then, of course, everyone, you're welcome to get in touch with us via the museum if you want to connect with anyone specifically that's on this call. We have everybody's registration details, obviously. If no one else has got any questions, I think I'm going to call this session to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. As I say, next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. South African time, we've got another 4 speakers. We'll have Bernie Lenoff documenting the Dorp piece. Bernie's from Uppington, and he'll speak about how he's documented the Uppington Jewish community. As Geraldine mentioned, Roy Ogus will be speaking about the South African Special Interest Group, or known as SAJM. Rabbi Moshe Silberhoft, the traveling rabbi, will be talking about the work that he's doing, traveling from small communities right through Africa. And he's entitled his talk, Bridging the Old and the New Using Modern Technology. He has a fascinating Facebook page where he's often posting interesting stories and the contemporary state of many of the small towns. And then finally, a very interesting talk by
just give him £20.
Sean O'Sullivan. Sean O'Sullivan is a documentary filmmaker that works a lot at the museum. He has an excellent and deep knowledge of the various film archives that are available right through from British Pathé to the SABC archives and many more in between. And he will give some insight as to how to go about finding historical footage that will supplement any kind of research that you happen to be doing. So that's 8 p.m. next Wednesday. You can use the same links and that you used today, but you will get reminders during the week and directly before the session. And then the final session is on Wednesday, the 13th of April. Geraldine will be presenting on a project she's been doing around the Wits medical graduates of 1960, which was a very Jewish heavy or Jewish majority class. Gail Lustig will be speaking on family medical practitioners and pharmacists in the northern suburbs of Cape Town. And then we'll finish off with Mark Latilo, who'll be talking about Ferreira Town and the early Jewish enclaves in Johannesburg, which also I'm sure will be fascinating. So those are the next 2 sessions coming up. Please make use of the emails to the museum, to our archivists, to the email list that Geraldine mentioned for anything that you would like to know, any areas of interest that you're working on and would like to present on at some point in the future. And thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you very much.